Okay, we are very happy to have Cantor Benjie Ellen Schiller with us today for our conversation. Hi, Benjie.
Hi, Josh. How nice to be with you.
Good to be together, even if it's through Zoom. So, first, we're going to be listening to your piece, Harninu. But first, I want to ask you, how did you get started in music, and specifically in Jewish music? Was there a person or some event that inspired you?
Thank you for asking. Boy, I can think of many inspirations, but one has to be my cantor. Um, Cantor Charles Julian, Alava Shalom, who was the cantor of Temple Sinai in Stamford, Connecticut, a Reformed synagogue, a small to medium synagogue. And in his spare time, what he loved to do is write music. And he wrote a jazz service, as some Jewish composers in the 70s were doing.
Hmm.
Um, and he invited the teenagers to come sing the service with him. So my memory is rehearsing Mi Chamocha to a jazz beat and something else in a reggae beat, bringing my guitar and singing the words that I learned in Sunday school or sang on Shabbat with these modern fun sounds, and his inviting us to riff with him and be a part of the service with him, being in the synagogue with the cantor, with my guitar and singing
Mm.
these words. I loved it. I loved the access. I loved the joy. I loved that he didn't take it seriously. But what I loved most of all is that he was in love with these words and
Mm.
wanted to share them
Mm.
in a way that brought joy and sweetness and levity to the service. I have no recollection whether we ever performed the service, but I remember getting to stand with the chazan, with my guitar in the synagogue, thinking that I was a pretty lucky person. And that had a big impact on me because from when I was quite young, I would sit at the piano where I'm sitting right now, and I'd just be in my little dream world, improvising. In fact, all through my piano lessons for all of my childhood, I liked to make up music much more than I liked to learn, and to my teacher's chagrin over the years. So Cantor Julian was a big impact on me. The next was being a Nifty Kid. That's the North American Federation of Temple Youth, no longer the name, also in the Reform community. And there was a lot of music. And the music at that time was just shifting from Israeli folk songs and American folk songs to Debbie Friedman and Jeff Klepper and Danny Freelander and then Craig Taubman and many others. And being a kid who loved to improvise and make up music, and also a kid who was looking for friends, looking for love,
Mm.
looking for community, and also looking for spirituality. I found all of that through Nifty and through that music. And like with Cantor Julian, it invited me in, and it said, that you're part of a community as a Jew, as a young person. And I related to it, and before I knew it, I was at the Kutz camp in Warwick, New York, learning how to be a song leader and learning how to teach this music, inspire other kids. And then, Josh, I found the Zamir Chorale of Boston under your leadership. And that was my first step really as an adult Jew, coming out of just the Reform community. I wouldn't say just, but coming out of that bubble into a larger Jewish world, where I met people, young people who were from all different walks of Jewish life and from all different kinds of professions, who were singing for the love of singing and joined Zamir because they wanted to be part of this community and because the music spoke deeply to them spiritually, artistically, religiously. And that was my next step. And that had a profound impact on me, which I've shared with you before. And I will gush, unfortunately, as I do. But I remember singing Janowski's Sim Shalom with you and the choir, with Cantor Abe Mizrahi. I had never heard a chazan like that. And I remember I wasn't standing in the rehearsal more than a few feet away from him, yet his voice and that music, I felt that the walls were shaking. I felt that the majesty was real. And the prayer for peace was reverberating within and amongst all of us. It was really an epiphany. And then, in that same rehearsal, we were singing so many different styles from Israel.
You were a
From the
student at
United
Boston
States.
University then. You were a
That's right.
student.
That's right.
You were studying voice?
I was studying voice, piano, and composition
Mm-hmm.
at Boston University, and eventually got my undergraduate degree in voice and theory and composition.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. And through most of my years at BU, I was a member of Zamir.
So you made the transition from folk singer, shall we say, to more of a classical bent of both composition and performance.
I did. As a 16-year-old, realizing that what I wanted to do with my life in some way involved around music, and I had been studying piano, but I wasn't sure it was in piano, and I didn't really know where I was going.
Hmm.
And I remember one day my mother asking me, "So you love music, you want to move forward with it, you want to involve it in your life. What do you love the most?" And I said, "Singing." So she said, "So let's get you a singing teacher." So I had my audition with a wonderful singing teacher in Connecticut, and I remember preparing Dodie Lee to sing for her. She didn't know Hebrew, but she took me on anyway and started to teach me the great Italian songbook. And I learned German lieder, and I prepared for my audition and eventually went to BU, but also wanted to study composition. Was also privileged there to study with some of the great composition teachers, Stephen Alpert, John Goodman, and others at Boston University. And that, along with Zamir Chorale, kind of put together for me where I then wanted to go with my life. I wanted to be a Jewish composer and performer in some way. And shortly thereafter, cantorial school kind of became an option for me.
So, related to that, your career is multifaceted. You're a teacher, a cantor, a songwriter. You've been a performer with your ensemble, Beged Kefet. You're a composer of beautiful choral music. How do you manage it all? I'm making you tired, right?
No, because I'm looking at someone for whom I would ask exactly the same question.
Yeah, but I'm interviewing you.
How do I manage it all? I don't even know how to begin to answer that.
Or, how do you make the transitions from one style to another, from one mode of communicating to another?
I think at the heart of it all, Josh, is an understanding that it all is about life and spirit and love and prayer and God. And there are many different ways of expressing that and many different forms to bring that to life. And I think what I've learned all through my life is that to bifurcate or separate any of these musical styles is a mistake. So that's one. What enables me to do what I do is my grounding in my synagogue, in my community, in my family, in my spiritual life, and to keep music such an active part of my very being. Most of my compositions, if not all of them, have come from my relationships with people in community and family in my life. And out of those relationships, this is the same little girl who sat at the piano and made up tunes. It's kind of my way of communing with God, with a deeper sense of my own self, my own romantic heart, my own yearning for peace, for goodness, for wholeness, for love. And so I've been able to, through music, tap something very deep in my own spiritual self. And through either my singing or my writing, my being a cantor, it's so very, very much connected for me. I don't see a separateness. I think what's really one of the greatest challenges being a mother and now a savta, and keeping all my work alive. That's been a bigger challenge, and a wonderful challenge. I'm very lucky to be able to live at a time where a woman can have all these professional possibilities and be taken seriously in her composing, in her prayer leading, in her teaching, and still come home to our kids and our grandkids.
Well, let me segue from that to this question. Our program is dealing with the challenges that women musicians have faced. So, were there obstacles that you had to overcome because of your gender? Was it a challenge for you to be taken seriously as a cantor, as a composer?
For the most part, I was lucky enough to be born at a time when things were opening up for women, including the Jewish community. Barbara Osfeld, Cantor Barbara Osfeld, the first ordained woman cantor of the School of Sacred Music, which it was then called, of Hebrew Union College, preceded me by, I'm going to guess, roughly maybe 15 years. The impediments in my study of Jewish music at the Hebrew Union College were mostly about the nature of the music. That the great music written by the great cantors and composers, the music of Chazanut, was designed for a man's voice. The idiom is very, very different. And that was an interesting challenge. And many of my teachers helped us realize how to kind of shift the range, shift the way one sings for a woman to make it appropriate and prayerful in a woman's voice. That was a great challenge and continues to be one for especially the dramatic sounds that a soprano or an alto can make. How can you make those work in the material of Chazanut?
Because you can't just take those wonderful tenor recitatives and arias from the synagogue, and there's a 200-year, repertoire there, and sing them an octave higher in the soprano range. So I know one solution for you was to compose your own repertoire. But again, aside from the congregational singing, how have you managed that to create recitatives that work for your voice?
Well, one thing to consider is how to treat the high range delicately. Those pieces of music where the tenor in the dramatic moment stays up in the range for a sustained period of time on a mezzo forte or forte, that doesn't work for a soprano. Just look at any Mozart art song. Look at the great classical composers. The arc of the melody is different in a woman's voice. We can touch that high register, but we don't want to stay on it for long because that sound can be strident. It's a little too much for the ear. So it's navigating how to find a way to work with the repertoire, both in the choice of key.
So you would transpose some things into a more comfortable key.
Transpose. And I try to err on the side of a little bit too low, not too low, but I err on the side of I don't ever want to be too high. I want to treat that high register, again, delicately and sensitively. Another part of my singing, this repertoire that I've tried to cultivate, is a more piano, softer, gentler approach in the higher register. There are moments for drama, but one has to choose very sensitively and carefully. Another aspect of a woman's voice for me as a lyric soprano is actually modulating my voice to be able to lead singing, facilitate the congregational singing. So one of the things I've studied in voice lessons for many years is how to sing in a healthy way in my middle range, and also to sing in a simpler way, almost to come back to a folk style, but to use that in a healthy way to invite the congregation to sing. So the message when I'm singing a niggin or a simple piece, the message is, I'm not filling up the room with my sound. I'm giving an invitation, a suggestion. Please join with me. Then my temptation would be to sing things a third higher. So I have to watch that and monitor that. In these days of Zoom, another challenge is to stay away from the microphone in a dramatic moment, because I get carried away, and before I know it, I'm belting it out. I'm in the middle of the prayer, and I have to remember. Tzimtzum, modesty, humility.
And I think some of the repertoire that probably all of the repertoire that we're speaking of, the traditional cantorial tenor repertoire, was created for synagogues where there was no microphone.
Right.
So this whole idea of singing today can be a very different art. You don't have to fill a room by singing fortissimo.
That's right.
Sempre.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's like that image I have of the chazan at a wedding singing right to the couple.
Yeah.
With everyone else as witnesses. And if you're able to have a sound system where you can sing very softly so they can hear, but everyone can receive it in a more sensitive kind of a way.
Let's go back to your own compositions now. Is there anything about them that the listener would say, that's Jewish music, and not just augmented seconds?
Right. In my liturgical music, when I'm writing a piece, let's say I have an Ahavat Olam for Shabbat evening, I will write with a cognizance and a sensitivity to the Nusach of the Ashkenazi tradition. And I will try to use that ambiance and use that mode as best I can in my own voice. In a piece that's not liturgical or wouldn't necessarily be used for a liturgical setting, there are other considerations. One is there a tradition of singing a particular piece, let's say a psalm text, in a particular way? Every Jewish composer has a soundtrack in their ear of how this particular text has been set before, or any particular structure that is used on a regular basis. And I try to be attentive to that. But of course, the challenge is to, in some ways, put that aside and commune right with the text and see what emerges from, and to trust one's sense of tradition, one's sense of appropriateness of a particular time, a particular sound, and see what emerges. So, for instance, my setting up Psalm 150, I was imagining modal sounds from all over the world, represented by the mention of all those different instruments.
Yeah. Well, the piece starts off for sure in the Mixolydian, or what do we call it, Adoshem Malach mode in synagogue music. So let me dig a little deeper now. When you are composing in these modes, is it something you set out to do, or is this just, as you said before, your soundtrack?
When I'm first thinking about how the piece would function, then I bring a conscious effort to my attentiveness to how this piece will serve in a community, how this piece will serve in a particular moment. And those are the practical considerations that come to bear in my conceiving of how this piece might work most effectively. But at some point, to be very honest with you, Josh, as much as I kind of plan that out and navigate that, I put it aside. And then what I do is try to directly communicate with the words. Let the words speak to me. Get inside the psalmist's mind and heart, or whatever the text might be, and just open to, as Hesher would say, radical amazement in the relationship with the text, and see what evolves. So there is a consciousness at the beginning. Think about how the piece would function, and then I let my romantic self and my spiritual self listen to the words. Imagine the drama inside the words, the love inside the words, whatever it might be, the message, and just allow it to unfold with a very open heart and an open mind.
And then it comes out you. So let me follow that up with maybe a trickier question. Is there anything about your music that a listener would say, that was composed by a woman? Do women composers have a unique voice?
One answer to that question would be, since the majority of the music I write is for voice, for singers, I'm writing with a consciousness of a woman's voice. That's my orientation. I'm thinking of a lyric quality of a woman's voice. I'm thinking range. I'm thinking of how a woman's voice would carry over a piano or a choir, and how a woman can and most successfully communicate in tone, in color, in range. But I know your question is deeper than that too. I can say that I'm writing from my vantage point as a mother, as a wife, as a sister, as a daughter, as a Jew, a woman, living in this time and place. My relationship to my community, to Israel, to God, to self, is based on my own personal experience, and that certainly comes from a place of being a woman, and a Jewish woman at this particular time. How that connects me to the music, I don't know how to describe that in words.
But it's the multifaceted aspects of who you are, your many personalities, your many identifications that come out in the music.
I would say, as one of the primary identifications for me is being a cantor, relating to a congregation, relating to a wedding couple, relating to a grieving family, to Shabbos and High Holy Days. That's a voice that is very much with me in my composing.
So composing, we're going to dig down a little deeper and talk about the piece Harninu that we're featuring. How did that come into being? What inspired you? What's your relationship with the text?
I first learned about Harninu, Psalm 81, when Jack Mendelssohn was commissioning composers to write a psalm for each day of the week. And I wrote, I set Harninu as a solo piece for Thursday. And the more I looked at the psalm for Thursday, the more I fell in love with those opening lines about creating a beautiful sound with harp, with all different musical instruments. Tik'u v'chodesh shofar, the culmination. B'keseh layom chagenu ki chok li Yisrael, who on this auspicious moment of the festival, it is a law for us. It is a right, whatever. There's something very ceremonial and, again, auspicious and beautiful about the beginning of this song. And so that sense of celebration, of kind of processing up the mountain, called to me in Harninu. So that's how it began. You then asked me to write this in memory of Rick Boyer, someone we all loved. His memory should be a blessing. Who played percussion. Nobody played percussion like Rick. And I then came back to thinking about all the instruments and the richness of the choir and the shofar and this moment in the festival. And so what I responded to was the beauty of the words, the call to bring every instrument before God on this festival. And I envisioned the piece as a ceremonial procession walking up to the temple with all the colors and the sounds and all the chaos of the community. And first we have the bell-like sounds of Harninu from all the different instruments and the choir. And as we go, then we proclaim, Ki chok Yisrael, who it is a law for Israel for all time. And then the music gets more sober.
Tell us about the piece. And we have these wonderful contrasts of, as you call it, the sober music of Ki chok, and then those wonderful, I'm going to use your term, bell-like tones for tik'u, these little sparks that come out.
Right. I was really thinking of the different instruments, and that we are all instruments with all the different colors that we bring, right? And so, and all of this seems to be leading up to me, leading up to the sound of the shofar.
So you scored it for choir and piano and trumpet and shofar. Can you talk about that?
To me, the brilliance of the trumpet sound was exactly the other color that would complement the choir, right? And to bring the brilliance of this moment and the excitement of this procession into being, that the drama of the trumpet, right? The very presence of that sound. It's related, of course, to the shofar. So it's ke'ilu, it's a shofar with actual notes. It's almost like that shofar. You know, it's the instrument to me in my ear that proclaimed, and that's what I hear this whole psalm about, proclaiming this moment for God. So that's why I chose a shofar, trumpet, and then to lead into, of course, the beautiful shofar, which is sounding. I'm thinking of the recording that Zamir made, and that's the performance in my ear. The shofar that doesn't have any particular sound, it plays between the sounds. That raw, ancient quality that is almost mysterious that we get to. So the trumpet was building to that.
You know, in the orchestra there was the instrument that's called the horn, the French horn, and we just got so used to it, we forget that horn is derived from an animal's horn, and that the first horns were what we call shofar. So it does have that earthy, almost animalistic, beyond human sound to it.
Yes, primal.
Yeah, primal.
It's our wake-up call.
Yes.
Shofar is our wake-up call.
Boy, do we need that.
Get it.
Benjie, when you compose, how do you go about it? Do you sit at the piano? Do you wait for the muse to inspire you? What do you do when you get stuck?
My most important first step is to get inside the words.
Mm-hmm. And you pretty much compose exclusively vocal music for texts.
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
That's my orientation.
Yeah.
For much of the music that I write. So the piece is based on a text. So I live with the text, Josh. I sit with it, I dream about it, I study it, and I speak it. I speak it over and over again to feel the inflection of the words, the syntax, the sounds, and how the Hebrew or the English is meant to be recited. And I try to really receive the words as fully as I can, because ultimately I think my job is to allow them to sing as naturally and as fluidly and as organically as they can. Not to fight the words, but do the very, very opposite, allow them to sing. So it's a lot of listening at the beginning. The use of piano is something that I play with. So my instinct is always to be at the piano. I'm the girl at the piano, as I've said already. That's where I began to write. The problem with being at the piano is that one focuses on a harmonic language as much as a melodic. And if I want to be truest to the words, I don't want to be seduced too much by a wonderful chord and a beautiful color and forget the linear.
The piano doesn't sing.
Right, right.
Yeah.
The piano supports, the piano colors. Now there are moments that the piano can sing, but we want the words to sing primarily. So I try to separate myself from the piano, and I sit or I walk, having those words in my mind, singing them again and again and again. Invariably, the tune comes when I'm not thinking about creating the tune. Some of the moments that have been the real epiphanies for me have been when I have exhausted all the possibilities and I really am stuck. And then I just let it go and I start to be in a dream state. Once I was on the Metro North, we were getting right to Grand Central Station, and that's where it came, and I almost forgot about it. And some deeper voice, what I guess you're calling the muse, clicks in, and the song begins. That's the most precious experience I can have. That comes from, to my mind, first the relationship with the words, and then just letting my heart speak without self-consciousness, without studying anything, just listening to something deeper. That's where I feel I can be a vessel for some kind of spiritual language that is way beyond my understanding.
It's a different state of consciousness where instead of trying, you allow. We are recording this interview during the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic. So how has this affected your professional life as a musician, as a composer, as a singer?
There have been some advantages and there have been a lot of challenges. I haven't been writing much. And I think that might be indicative of the fact that that muse has been quiet. I'm feeling a sense of being unmoored, a sense of a shaky foundation in my, as I think all of us are feeling in many ways. I am less connected to the community on a regular basis and not feeling that relationship. And the other reason I'm writing less is because my teaching is taking up a lot more time. I'm finding that a one-on-one conversation like this is much more gratifying than teaching in a Zoom classroom. So I'm spending many, many hours with students, which is very gratifying. It leaves me less time to do my own thinking and writing. And I guess that's okay, but I do miss my writing. The other part of that answer that's been actually a great advantage is leading the congregation, even by Zoom, has allowed me to create more intimate moments with the congregation. I wouldn't necessarily have been able to create were we in the room together. That moment after the Amidah, after the standing prayer, where often in our congregation we sing a niggin together to kind of get from the place of the private prayer back into community, back with the congregation. I've been able to experiment with many different kinds of music and singing, and even using some of my own compositions. But unfortunately, of course, without the communal voice, much lies flat. I miss the harmony, I miss the spontaneity, I miss hearing everyone and feeling that uplift. So I'm trying to provide as much as I can through the screen. And I'm very lucky. I'm one of the few cantors who gets to lead with the rabbi. We lead together, Les and I, and often sing harmony. And that's been wonderful. So it's been a very mixed experience. And my students at the Debbie Friedman School of Sacred Music are having to learn music with recorded accompaniments rather than working with the pianist in the same room. My goodness, you know this. The choral parts are all patched together, one voice at a time. A mixed bag. I'm feeling both the gratitude of being able to provide the music for my congregation and the teaching for my students, but also feeling very limited and feeling some of the sadness that the world is experiencing right now, and for all the people who are suffering. And all the questions we're asking before this election. But as we're talking, I'm realizing that it would be a great solace for me, great healing for me to come back to writing. And I hope I can at some point soon. It's not there yet, but I'm waiting for it.
Please do. And if you write something for chorus, we'll jump right on it. Benjie, this has been wonderful. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us?
A couple of things. To you, Josh, the recordings and the teachings you're providing for us on a weekly basis from Zamir, from the incredible library from the Boston Zamir Chorale, have been so special. My husband and I were just listening to your interview with Tzvi Avni and his Hallelujah Psalms, that recording. I mean, that is a gift. So all the gifts were being given by people such as yourself, who are really doing the work to provide, a connection, continuing connection to the music, to our community, to learning, to growing together. That's been incredible. I just want to say, on behalf of all of us, thank you for that.
Thank you.
And the other learning is that when all is said and done, as corny as it sounds, this music is such a deep key. It's a reservoir for all of us, for our sense of connection, our sense of being a Jew, our sense of sacred awareness, a sense of waking up. And even if it comes through the screen, even if it comes through a recording, it is keeping me going, keeping us alive. And I feel so honored to be able to play a small part of that. And let's just keep singing. Let's just keep providing for each other and reminding ourselves that this is temporary and we will be back together whenever that is. And we will keep singing. And when we do get back together, and when we do sing together and hear a concert together and make music, it will be as never before.
I said to my chorus, close your eyes and imagine it's the first rehearsal we have after the pandemic is over. What is that going to feel like? And sometimes you don't appreciate something until it's taken away and then it's given back to you. But it's enough already.
It's enough already. I'm ready for cacophony. I'm ready for the noise of a rehearsal. I'm ready for it. I'm ready for you to quiet us down so we can get started.
Genug schön. Benjie, thank you so much. It's been really wonderful talking to you. And be well, be healthy, and keep making wonderful music.
Thank you, Josh. I wish the same to you.
Thank you.